As you might have already guessed, I've got another endgame puzzle for you guys. This time, we've got a composition by Josef Kling and Bernhard Horwitz from Chess Studies and Endgames all the way back in 1889. So we've reached an endgame here where white has double pawns on the d file and black's only got one. It's white's move now, and the task is to win the game. What makes this endgame important is that if white had only one pawn, the game would be a draw. Let's take a look at a quick example. It doesn't matter which pawn white has, the game is a draw no matter where the pawn is. You could try pushing the pawn to d5, to which black will respond d6. And no matter what, black is not going to allow you to enter and penetrate his defense. White king to d4, black to d7. White to c4, black king to c7. b5 from white, and now black maintains an opposition with king to b7, and so on. Now, white having two pawns makes this a whole different story. Here, white is going to win without a doubt, but still needs to play this the correct way because only one move is going to lead to the win, while all the others are going to end in a draw or a loss. Now, tell me if you could find the right move. Pause the video, once again, if you want to challenge yourself, and let me know in the comments if you managed to figure it out. Now, in this position, white can move his king to the flanks, move his king back, or push the d-pawn. So, which plan of action is the correct one? If we're going to try and outflank our opponent with king to c4, thinking that we have a tempo advantage by pushing our pawns, unfortunately, that's not the correct way to do it. Black is going to just respond with their king to c7, and white is going to have no real way to promote the pawn. You can't push the pawn because black is simply going to take it, and at the same time, we can't play king to b5 because it allows black to arrive at the d6 square. White's only move is to go back to c4. Black is again going to play king to c7, and we arrive at the same spot. King to c5 is going to lead to the same result, but with a few changes in moves. Black instead is going to play pawn to d6, check. White king to b5, thinking he would somewhat flank the king. Now this plan would have worked if black had blundered and played d7 or d8. So white plays b6, black king to d7. White to b7, and after the black king moves, white is going to gain access to the d7 square and win the game. Black king to d8, white to c6. Black king to e7, trying to defend the pawn. White moves to c7, and due to the pawn on d5, black can no longer defend the pawn and is forced to move to e8. White captures, and even if black manages to move in front of the pawn, he doesn't have an opposition here because of white's double pawns. In this position, white was going to win anyway, regardless of having one or two pawns, because he manages to put his king on one of the key squares. Okay, so going back to our original position, black is not going to make that terrible blunder and let white approach his pawn. Instead, he's going to play king to b7. And white has no way of moving forward now, so he's got to step back to c4. Black moves to c7, and now every time white is going to try to approach, black is going to respond accordingly, like so. So you see, there's no real way to make any progress. Even if white is going to try and reroute to the other flank, black is simply going to do the same. So we see that trying to flank is just not going to work. Stepping our king back is also going to lead to the same result. Black moves king to e7. So you might be thinking now that maybe if you make a bigger detour, you're going to somewhat end up in that winning position I just showed you and be able to play king to f3. Sadly, no matter how much you try, black is never going to let you get in there. He moves his king to f6. We move our king to g4, he's going to move his king to g6. And again, we can see the same pattern going on here. Right? So, by process of elimination, the winning move is clearly pawn to d6. Congrats, you found the right move. Now, I strongly think most of you managed to find it without my help, but I also believe that some among you kind of found it by accident, and you don't know why that this is the winning move. So let me tell you. Now, it might have just been the first move that came to mind for you, but let me explain the reasoning behind why this is the winning move. It's because pawn to d6 cuts away the c7 and e7 squares from black. So, the enemy king has to waste a precious move to bring his king to the flanks. Also, Black can't support his pawn from the side, only from behind now. This tempo gained, plus the inability from Black to defend the pawn from the side, is exactly what wins the game for White here. Black is forced to move to either c8 or e8. Both moves are going to have the same pattern, so let's just look at one of them. Black moves to e8. White moves king to c4. And again, Black needs to go further away by playing this king to f7. Now, are you able to find the next winning move for White? If you're thinking king to c5, unfortunately, that's just going to draw the game. Black's going to move his king to e6, and now what? The only way for White to keep defending the pawn is by moving the other pawn and checking the king. But here, Black has this beautiful defense with king to e5. White can no longer defend the d6 pawn because the only square that would allow that, c6, is attacked by the enemy pawn. So, he needs to move somewhere else. White king moves to c4, Black takes the pawn. King to d4, Black king to e7. And this is going to be a draw no matter what. Now, as White, we've seen exactly how much of a threat king to e6 really is. So, you might be thinking of playing pawn to d5 first to prevent the enemy king from reaching that square. Sadly, this isn't going to work either, because Black is going to arrive at the e5 square from f6 now. And if you try king to d4 to prevent that, you're only going to be stuck defending, without any way to advance your pawns. So, the winning move here is actually king to b5, taking advantage of the enemy king's position. Now, after king to e6, we're going to want to play c5, pushing Black away to the f file. Once the enemy king is on the f file, we're going to advance our king and go after the Black pawn with king to b6. If Black tries to get back to e6, now White would play king to c7, pushing Black yet again to the f file. After that, White would capture the pawn and promote within the next few turns. If Black would move to d5 instead, White would still capture the Black pawn. Black captures as well, and now this promotion is going to be very easy for White. Just move the king away and push the pawn, because Black just can't catch it. I hope you enjoyed Josef Kling's study here, even though it's more than 100 years old. I hope you were still able to pick up some valuable information from it. Now, even at first glance, this endgame seems pretty easy when doing it as a puzzle, but it's a lot more difficult to try and apply the technique in your actual games. You see how easily the game could turn into a draw if you don't make the correct move in the correct order. So, as always, keep practicing, keep studying. If you want to see us make a specific video, mention it down in the comments, and we'll see you next time.